Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of the Roma Forum podcast. I'm Anthony, and I'm joined today by Christian and Luca. You know, we wanted to start this second episode today, kind of keying you guys into more of our own experience with Roma, why we support Roma, maybe a little bit more about our backgrounds. So, to start off this episode, I'm going to pass it off to Christian, who's going to give us an idea as to how he started supporting Roma, especially growing up in Canada.
Yeah, probably similar to a lot of people, but at least for me personally, so my dad's side of the family originate from just a little city just outside of Rome. It's called Latina, so not too far outside the city center there. But my nonno, my dad have been supporting Roma since, day one, essentially from their early childhood. So, like many, I just kind of followed in their footsteps and just fell in love with this club ever since. Um, so that's how it actually started, me following Rome as the team and the club. Um, for sure, Francesco Totti had a huge impact and influence on, my continued support for the club. I've always idolized him as a player on and off the pitch. I played my entire life, competitive growing up. I still play to the day. And I feel like my playing style kind of emulated him in a sense that, I've always tried to be like him, probably like a lot of other people who support him. But yeah, Totti for sure for me is a huge, huge reason as to why I support Roma and follow them so closely. I was fortunate enough too in 2012 we took a family trip out to Boston. If anyone remembers, the team did that USA tour. They played a couple friendly matches. So
Mm-hmm.
in this case, they played Boston, or not, sorry, they played in Boston against Liverpool. And to make a long story short, my dad surprised me with a meet and greet with the team, and that was probably the best day of my life. I honestly, not a day goes by where I don't think about that. So I was fortunate enough to meet Il Capitano, and yeah, that was the greatest day ever. I'll never forget that. So I met him there, saw the team play, practice, and then actually the following year, if there's any Canadians or people in the GTA Toronto area listening, they actually came to Toronto and played a friendly against TFC. It's an MLS club, and I seen the team up close there again as well. So that was really fun. But yeah, I mean, just to kind of wrap up my story with it, just following my dad and Nono's footsteps, always live in Roma, from the area. Uh, Francesco Totti, still is my idol. I still argue the fact that he is the best Italian player ever. Um, it's I don't think we'll ever see anyone like him, at least play for our club. But yeah, you know, he's still a big part of it. And
Yeah,
I also want to add, it'd be nice to see him back one day at some sort of role within the club in the hierarchy. But you never know what the future holds. But that's my story. Um, pass it
awesome.
on to Luca. Yeah.
Yeah, so my story is a little different. I'm gonna take us back to and I promised the folks here that for those listening, I haven't told the group my first Roma encounter. So I'm telling it now live. So I hope you all enjoy it as much as the rest of the team, Anthony and Christian, enjoy it here too. So taking us back to about July, so late June, early July of 2005. I was just, I guess, finishing up maybe fifth grade. And we were on a family vacation, a Mediterranean cruise. And either the first or second night, you sit down at the table, and every night we had dinner planned at, these big round tables, and my grandmother, and we're all laughing and joking. And so you really form a bond with the waiters and waitresses and people at the casino. And it's a great time if you've never been on a cruise. But, first or second night we're there, we're at dinner. The waiter comes up and asks us, hey, do you guys know any Italian soccer players? And we all kind of were just like, no, we don't know anything. So to give a little background, I mean, I grew up playing baseball, football, I wrestled, soccer was never on the radar. I mean, maybe when I was 2 or 3, we played with other 2 or 3-year-olds who, didn't know their ass from their elbow. So it really wasn't a big thing. And my dad, we grew up playing football and we watched football. We had season tickets for Ravens and Orioles, and that was the only sporting event or sports that were on our radar. So we said, no, we don't know anyone.
America.
Yeah. And he said, well, there's a very famous Italian soccer player who's right at that table over there. And we were like, oh, well, that's great. And the guy was like, yeah, it's Francesco Totti. And we were like,
come on.
Nice. That's cool.
Crazy.
That's great. Fast forward a year or, the next July, and Italy's winning the World Cup. And boy, did I feel like a total idiot. And then fast forward another, 10 years. Well, I don't know. Fast forward to 2012 when I was studying in Italy. And then I felt like even a bigger idiot thinking, and at that time, his now ex-wife was pregnant with Christian in 2005. I think he was born, November of that year. So, I think they just got married in June. So yeah, it was, and my brother, actually, there was one, I have 3 older brothers. One of them actually recognized the name only because of a video game. And it wasn't Totti, wasn't the last name. It was Tutti, Tutti. And so he was like, oh yeah, I know who that is. But that's the extent. So that's kind of where, Rome soccer kind of started to trickle in, but it wasn't really until I moved to Rome for a year to study that I really started following. I actually never made it to a match while I was there, which is a crime.
Wow.
Yeah, I just, was studying and worried about other things. And so, but then I get home and I went full throttle. And some days I think I'd rather watch Roma than the Ravens or Orioles, which
do anything else. Yeah.
My family would probably own me.
So did you end up meeting him when you seen him on the cruise, or did you even see him?
No,
you just heard that he was there.
No, I mean, I saw him. Yeah, we saw him and we saw his pregnant. I mean, he was we saw him, but again,
that's crazy.
That would be like, telling me that nowadays that the WWE, player or famous guy is sitting right over there. I would say,
yeah,
oh, that's cool. I'm sure someone else cares, but I surely
Where
don't.
was this again? Where was the cruise you said?
It was Mediterranean cruise. I want to say that he might have gotten off a day early in Bari or something. But
wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. To this day.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I sort of have a background a little bit both, similar to both of your stories. My very first sports memory was that 2006 World Cup. I was 7 years old. I remember when Italy won, my grandmother making us ice cream and celebrating. And I was living in Brooklyn at the time. I grew up in Brooklyn. And there was a parade in Brooklyn after Italy won the World Cup. It was just a really intense experience. But my family background, it's a little mixed. It's all Italian, but it's kind of different. On my paternal side, like Tony Soprano, my family's from Avellino. And on my mom's side, it's half Salerno and half Roma. So I grew up liking Roma. Was I always super passionate when I was, 8, 9, 10? Not really. I think probably when I was around end of, 11, 12 is when I really started getting into it. Because, like Luca, I never played. I'm flat-footed. I've got terrible, terrible feet. And so I grew up playing football. I grew up wrestling. So once I sort of became more interested in soccer, this whole other world opened up. I remember when the team came in 2017, and when I was a young kid, everybody loved Totti. And I've always been a little bit of Anthony opposite. So everyone loved Totti, but Daniele De Rossi was my favorite player. I mean,
That's respectable, though. I mean,
yeah, when I was a kid, I didn't know how to put it into words, but now you can simply say that Daniele De Rossi is the embodiment of Romanismo, right?
yeah,
Everywhere and always. It doesn't matter that he went to Boca for Maradona or whatever. Like he is a true son of the city and a true son of the club. And I loved his attitude. I saw, I wanted to emulate him in sports, and he had a great personality. So in 2017, when they came to the United States to play Real Madrid, I had the chance to see them practice the day before. And after the practice, I got to meet Daniele De Rossi. And I mean, I was just out of my mind. It's something beautiful when you grow up and you're a kid and you look up to these players, right? Because these players are doing something good, right? Like sports, athleticism, the discipline necessary to do those things, those are good qualities for children to emulate. And so when you grow up looking at this player like, wow, like this is a larger than life person, and you finally meet them, I met them so many years later, it was really a fulfilling moment.
yeah.
You know, Roma is something so special, but not just because it's Roma, but because of the people it produces. I mean, players like Totti, Daniele De Rossi, these amazing personalities. I mean, say what you want about him, but Alessandro Florenzi, amazing guy. He had a
Oh
great,
yeah.
great personality. The sons of these clubs are really inspirational, you know. And so
Hard to come
today
by.
here, I'm sorry?
They're hard to come by for sure nowadays.
Very much so. I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a club that produces players like that. And when you give examples, it's always like the same examples. You could think of like Celtic, Boca Juniors, um, River Plate, like all of these really intense clubs that are deeply felt by the people who support them. Um, you know, all these years later, here I am on the Roma Forum podcast talking about what I love, and I really do love this team, and I love this sport uh, in a way that is special because my family's from Rome, but also in a way that, I can appreciate it as someone. I was never forced to play soccer when I was young. And so this affection that I have for the sport, naturally developed, and my curiosity became an infatuation. Um, to wrap up a little bit of who we are, I think it's a good time to transition into who they are. And by they, I mean these managers who are linked to Roma. There are a lot of names over the past week that are floating around, and I think that there are probably three that have made the biggest impact that people are talking the most about, and that's number one, Ancelotti. Ancelotti's played on Rome. He says this is his club, et cetera, et cetera. And Bruno Conti says, well, if it's your club, if you're a son of Rome, then come coach, right? So it's sort of like this love affair that has circumstantially been kept apart. Number two is Allegri, the titan of Serie A. He's a serial winner. And then Gasperini, which seems to be the most solid of the rumors. So I wanted to know what you guys think is of those three, the most linked to Roma. Was there one that you really liked? Is there one you really don't like? Luca, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was saying earlier in the week, I think with these changes, and I will answer your question for everyone, but I think with these changes, one thing that I think would be also very important for Roma to do is kind of to restart at the the DS level, because when you get a big time manager, and I think we saw it a little bit with Mourinho, and you get a DS who doesn't know what they're doing or doesn't have the experience within Serie A, it kind of turns into I was going to say something else, but it kind of turns into it doesn't turn out well. Let's just put it that way.
Mhm.
And obviously Mourinho, it ended up well there, but I mean, I don't think you can any of those three. I mean, I am getting amped up. I would be ecstatic with any of the three. I think Gasparini is somebody who I would go for at this point in time. I mean, his track record with a club that, with Atalanta is, I mean, bar to none. I mean,
It's unbelievable.
brought them from nothing to Champions League every single year, and they don't have the big, pocketbook like, Juventus or Real Madrid or, any other club that the other two managers have managed, really.
Right.
So I think for Roma's conditions at this point in time, I think you go Gasparini. But I mean, maybe things change when if the new stadium ever gets built. But with Gasparini, I think you have to bring in a new DS to go along with them. So their project is in sync with one another. I mean, they're in sync with one another.
Christian, what do you think?
Yeah, no, Luca, pretty much spot on there. I would have to agree that the most realistic coach for Roma on the bench, at least, given the point in time and the circumstances, would be Gasparini. But starting from the top at the DS role is vital, right? I mean, you need consistency from the top down, right to
An
the
Italian.
bench. Yeah, and as you guys know in our group chat there, I'm stressing that we need an Italian on the bench, or at least in the hierarchy level. I'm okay with American ownership, but we need someone, and again, I'm reiterating from what I say to you guys during the week, but we need someone like Ranieri who is, kind of more behind the scenes calling the shots in terms of, transfers, scouting, but a player or not a player, a manager like Gasparini who can easily communicate these ideas with Ranieri would be a lot more, transparent within the club. It would just, I don't know. I think it reminds me of the era when the Sensis, when the Sensis were the owners. I feel like things are a lot more crystal clear communication between top and bottom. But given the type of squad we have, the type of players, uh, compared to a coach like Allegri or even Ancelotti, I think Gasperini has more experience with the type of players that Roma have currently. As we know, he's brought in Atalanta from, being more at the bottom half of the table when he started back in, I think it was like 2016 or so.
Yep, 2016.
Up until now, right? And look, he won the Europa League last year. I mean, I don't think he's a bad option. I would have to say he would be my number one pick. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone would disagree though if Ranieri was willing to stay as a manager, they would be all for it. There's obviously these rumors that we've heard in the last month or so that, the Friedkins have been trying to persuade him to not retire and take on a different role within the club, but he said it himself, it's time for him to kind of step down from coaching. I mean, he's technically doing a victory lap right now with Roma, just kind of steering the ship. He was already retired, as we know, but he's done a great job. But yeah, just to top it off, I would say Gasparini's my choice for sure compared to the others, given the circumstances.
How would you feel about Montella?
I don't know. I feel like Montella, he was with Roma back in what 2013. I would take Allegri over Montella just because I feel like Allegri is more stern.
Well, Allegri has a track record of winning.
Yeah, he's a serial winner. I don't think you
Yeah.
can compare the two. Manager of the Turkish national team.
But if you're asking between Montella and Gasparini, I would say Gasparini all day right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you guys made some really good points, and leaving this reality about the DS aside and sort of looking at each of these managers, is Gasparini the best choice given the circumstances? Maybe. I think that we have to keep in mind and remember that when he joined Atalanta in 2016, it took him a couple of years to get his footing before he started to see real results. And I don't think Rome is the city where that happens easily.
No.
We saw what happened with Lookman and Gasperini, and he's not a guy that like praises in public and criticizes in private. He like criticizes in public and then rips apart in private.
Mhm.
Right? He's got a very fiery personality. I think that we have to be careful because Juric coached under Gasperini, and some of Juric's style, most of his style, comes from the Atalanta coach. We got to be careful. I think that honestly, if they give him a 4, 5, maybe even 6-year deal, you've got to commit to this guy. It's 2025. He's managed Atalanta for 9 years, right? And it took a couple of years for him to get settled. Ancelotti is an interesting manager. I mean,
can I interject there for a second?
Yeah.
With the Juric point, and I kind of mentioned this earlier today. That whole argument of he's a disciple of Gasperini, he coached under him. That's like saying Josh McDaniels is a disciple of Bill Belichick. I mean, the two, just because he coached under him, he tries to emulate, what doesn't mean really much, in my opinion.
Sure. I think that, when you use that Belichick, Josh McDaniels example, that's true. But when we talk about Juric and Gasperini, I think it's a little different, especially when you're looking at what sort of tactics was Juric trying to emulate. And one of those things is like constant pressure. Do we have the players to keep up with constant pressure? When we lose the ball in the attacking third, can our attackers pressure the defenders? And we kind of struggled to do that with Juric. When it worked. And there were a couple of games that were absolutely brilliant under Juric. And, it was smashing victories to the point where, Juric was turning around and he was recorded saying, God is dead, right? Like celebrating after he replaced Daniele De Rossi. Okay, I think we can temper it, say, Juric brings his own ideas, yes, but he is a disciple of Gasperini, yes. Would it be the same result? I don't think so. I think Gasperini is a different manager than Juric. Now, Ancelotti, interesting manager. Is he one of the greatest managers of all time? Yes, he might be the greatest manager of all time. I think an argument can be made there. But when we think about the teams he's managed and where he's found the most success, it's Real Madrid, both stints, right? Now and before he coached Bayern, and then before that first stint, Real Madrid, PSG. And he averaged, I think, his points per game as manager for all 4 of those. So PSG, then Real Madrid, then Bayern, and then he went to Napoli, and then he went to Everton, and then I think he returned to Real Madrid right after that. So those stints at Real Madrid, PSG, and Bayern, he's points per games, they're over 2, okay? But then look at like Napoli and Everton. Roma we can't compare ourselves to Bayern or Real Madrid in terms of players, in terms of financial power. We're much more comparable to Napoli or Everton, okay? And when he was at Napoli and when he was at Everton, I think at Napoli he averaged 1.8, which is good. Okay, that's not terrible. Is it enough for top 4 right now with Serie A's current climate? Maybe not. And then at Everton, it was 1.6, which was not good. With Ranieri right now, who's not coming back at all, he's retiring. I think he's been pretty clear. With Ranieri right now, we have the highest points per game since that wonderful year with Di Francesco, right? I think it was the year before he was sacked. It's a difficult situation, but I don't even think that Ancelotti should be considered right now. He's a serial winner, but he needs to win under a certain environment. And right now, Rome and Roma, the club, are not that environment for him. We can't do it. We can't help him be successful.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it would be awesome, right? Ancelotti coaching Roma. We got so used to Mourinho. Like Mourinho's like the special one, right? And he comes to Roma and he turns everything on its head, and he makes everyone believe, and the stadium's packed every week. We want that aura again. We want that X factor, like we had with Mourinho. But this is not the right place for Ancelotti. And then Allegri. I think Max, honestly, with the squad we have and the climate of Roma, and can we actually give Gasperini 5 years? Right? It's different. He signs the contract for 5. Is he going to be on the bench for 5? Is another? It's nobody knows. Nobody knows. Wrong. It's
I
one
think
of the.
the day of these 5-year contracts, especially in a place like Rome where it's rinse and repeat almost every year,
Yeah,
is almost unrealistic. And he's
completely.
also not a young guy either. Gasperini's like what, like late 60s or so?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
He might be a little older than
uh,
Ancelotti. Yeah,
yeah, like Ranieri is in his early 70s, but I just think in a place like Rome where it's literally it's that meme on Twitter, you get my hopes up, you crash, and then
yeah.
what's that one, right? Yeah, that's what it is. So I think like sure you can throw him a 5-year deal, but is it actually gonna last? Realistically, in my opinion, I, I, it
No,
never
the
lasts
answer
in
is no.
Rome. Like
No.
historically, when is the last time, right?
We had a
Like
coach for 5 years.
Maybe never.
yeah,
Oh,
well
I
that's
have
what I
no
mean.
idea.
Yeah, like but every coach says it. Rome is like one of the hardest places, if not the hardest place in Italy
Yeah.
to be on the side of the fans and keep the locker room together. It's just that's what you get when you have such a passionate fan base, cultural club in general. I mean, the heat is so unbearably hot
Mhm.
when you're on that bench. I
I
just,
mean, from the
I
minute you walk
just,
in the door,
yeah,
it's yeah.
yeah,
And for maybe some listeners who aren't too familiar with Serie A or Roma in particular or soccer at all, I mean, you can compare the climate in Rome in terms of sports to New York City, even taking it up a notch, right?
hmm.
So it's a
Anyways,
tough spot. It is. It's not possible. He signs a 5-year deal. I think it's ridiculous to think he'll stay for 5 years. I think it's the Friedkins' attempt to sort of say, "Hey, like, look, we know what we're doing," and they really don't. And we know that they don't because they're trying to sign a manager for 5 years.
hmm.
Is it what we need? Probably. Is it what we're going to let ourselves have? Probably not, because the life of a Romanista is suffering, and it's oftentimes self-inflicted. Um, so I would maybe say that Allegri might be the best option, um, given that I don't think he needs 5 years, and the fact that we're not going to give anyone 5 years is pretty obvious. So transitioning this topic is very, very intense. You know, it's sort of like when you're a fan, you're looking at like, who's this person who's going to take care of the thing that I love and, make it win, right? So it's an important topic. Now, on social media, on X and Instagram, we put out questions for this pod, and several people got back to us. And I don't know, do you guys want to go through maybe
Sure,
2 or 3 of them?
sure, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So Francesco asked, Pellegrini and Cristante should be the priority number 1 sales in the summer. Okay. Um, I'll kick it off. I think Cristante, yes. I think Pellegrini's not long for this team. I don't know if it ends this summer, but Cristante definitely. What do you guys think?
I think, yeah, Cristante yesterday, sell him yesterday. But Pellegrini, I think it's a lose-lose. I mean, he stays with the club, and we see kind of how he's played. We sell him, and he becomes the superstar, I bet.
exactly.
It's like, I mean, we're not going to win, and we sell him, and who knows, maybe the fans revolt. So I just think it's a lose-lose with Pellegrini, unfortunately. But
Hmm.
I think you got to sell him. I mean, every time he's on the pitch, we're down a man. It's brutal to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
I agree with, yeah. No, go ahead.
no, that's it.
Yeah, I agree with the Cristante thing. I mean, I think it's time's overdue now, you know. So what it is, I agree. Cristante's got to go. Pellegrini, Luca, you made a good point. It definitely is a lose-lose in the sense that, you know, he's the type of guy that as soon as he leaves Trigoria, he's going to go somewhere else and just become an all-star. It's just a classic ex-Roma player thing to do. My thing with Pellegrini is that, but we've said this, you know, since Mourinho's second year, where he had that crazy year at
Mm-hmm.
Pellegrini. Do we give him another chance? Do we give him another year to bounce back? Will he bounce back? Is it just a mental thing this year? Which clearly it is, because we know he's got uh, an incredible ability in that midfield. He's a great talent, but I think it's totally a mental thing. You know, just seeing him on the pitch this season so far, under all three coaches, he's
Mm-hmm.
at least in my opinion, he looks like he doesn't have that fight in him, whereas someone like Mancini does. Um, he's walking. I mean, if he's okay with being someone coming off the bench, maybe similar in a role like El Shaarawy, where he's not a starter, but he comes off the bench late in the
Mm-hmm.
second half or starts the second half. If he's okay with that, I'm okay with him staying. But clearly, he hasn't been the starting 11 for the last, I would say, probably since the new year. He hasn't really been a consistent starter. So I would leave it up to him. You would have to have a conversation with, you know, management, and they would basically say that if he's okay not being a starter or being the center of the project, you know, your locker at Trigoria is still here. But if not, you know,
Yeah.
you gotta look elsewhere. But
Then
it's a lose-lose. I
they
agree,
Yeah.
got
Luca.
they got to do something with his salary. Then I mean, 6
For
million.
sure.
6 million is
Allocate
too
that
much.
somewhere else. Lock Sviat down because that guy is basically an Allison 2.0 for us.
Mm-hmm.
We can't let this guy go. Um, He has single-handedly saved us in 1S games over the
Yeah.
last over since De Rossi gave him his opportunity when he started. Like that's not even an exaggeration. I don't think anyone
Yep.
can disagree.
No.
Like
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest problem, well, last thing about Pellegrini, on whether or not he'll be sold, you know, this actually relates to another question I wanted to ask was from one of our viewers. It's will Lorenzo Pellegrini bounce back this year? It's tough. He's 28, so he's not too old. You know, I don't think he's old enough to where you can ask him the question, are you okay just being a bench player, right? Are you okay not being, you know, at the center or at least part of the center of the project? So unless he's okay with it and he's okay with a pay cut, I think that's the only way he stays. And
it's not really it's 28. Like in my opinion, you hit your prime between 27 and 31.
yeah,
That's what I think, at least.
yeah,
He's if he just gets out of the slump, which he's been in for like literally a whole season, you know, he's
yeah.
right back to where he was before.
It's all
And
in his head
maybe
too.
it's
Yeah.
100% a mental thing.
Yep. It's all because the technical, the skill, the technical ability, it's all there. It's just mental. So
100%.
will he bounce back? I hope. He might not,
It's
and
tough to say,
it's tough. He's
especially
got it.
because we have a new manager coming whom we don't know exactly who that is yet.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
that's the
really
thing.
hard.
It's if it's Gasparini, you know, is he going to sniff out the weakness and
Yeah.
you know say something in a press conference or you know force a move out? But
Yeah.
um, next question. Well, this will be our last question. So, thoughts of Mancho permanent captaincy. So, for people who might be new to Roma, Mancho is the nickname of Gianluca Mancini, who, since Pellegrini's been essentially relegated to the bench, has been Roma's captain. And so, is his captaincy something that's going to endure into the next phase of Roma, whoever the manager might be? Um, I hope so. I mean, that guy's got the personality that this team is dying for. He cares so much. He cares so much about Roma that you know he has a very unique personality. And you know, in Italy, guys with that personality, you either love them or hate them. And a lot of people hate him, and a lot of people love him. But he loves Roma so much, and he cares so much about his role in the club that he's been able to mature
Yeah.
in a profound way over the last couple of seasons. I mean, he was, I think it was
firecracker. I mean,
firecracker.
You looked at him the wrong way, and he's ready to choke you.
Yeah, bite your neck off. I mean, I remember Vlahovic's last season at Fiorentina. We played them, and Vlahovic was on the floor getting up, and Mancini went over and pushed him back to the ground. Like, that's the kind of guy we're dealing with. Now
He's still
mature.
a hothead, but he's definitely
Completely.
cooled off a little bit over the
Yeah.
last year or so, for sure.
Yeah.
But
So do
he's
you
still
guys?
got that fight.
So this is a good question, I guess, from me now. So next manager comes in, Mancini maintains the captaincy. Who's the vice captain? I think it's obvious. I'll let you guys. I think it's Milos Svilar. I think Svilar should be the vice captain of Roma. An argument maybe Dybala. I mean, Dybala loves Roma, and I'm sorry for any Juventini friends who might be listening, but I think it is very obvious that Dybala loves Rome and loves Roma in a very special way. Remember when he did that video after he signed, he's like, I think maybe in another life I was a Roman.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah,
I loved Rome.
that was crazy.
That was amazing. That
we were all on the edge of our seat.
Yeah. So who do I think Svilar, vice captain? He's so vital to the club. You give him the money he wants. You make him vice captain. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Don't get me wrong. Svilar has been incredible this year, but I want someone as captain or vice captain who's willing to die on the pitch. I mean, give everything every single match. And it's kind of tough to tell with him if he'll do that. Now, is there somebody else? I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of somebody else who is that way. And at this point in time, I don't think so. Yeah, I mean,
I don't think so.
That's a tough question.
Yeah. Christian, what do you think? Do you think that there's any player besides Mancini or Svilar who exhibits that captain's aura?
For me, at least, I'm probably speaking on behalf of a lot of Romanisti, but it's always nice to see an Italian or at least a Roman player, obtain that captaincy. So whether he's a bench player or not, I'll circle back to Pellegrini again, assuming he's at Roma next year. I mean, I don't have a problem with him being the vice captain, but as long as, but also again, back to your point, Anthony, Dybala does deserve to have that sort of leadership. He already has a big part in the locker room. He's a little bit more experienced than most of the guys, and he loves Roma. But I would say between those two, for me, Svilar is I don't know. It's tough. I would focus more on just locking that guy down for an extension. Giving him a higher salary. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird question, just because it's like Mancini and Pellegrini just go back and forth. Whoever starts the game is essentially the captain, and in the last few months it's been Mancini. So for me, it's a tough one. I would still place Pellegrini second under the assumption that he is still on Roma, but in the event that he's not, I would say Dybala for sure.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I think Dybala is probably the other right answer.
And Christian, I think you might slaughter me, but I think not next year, but maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, I think Pizzilli is someone who could fill that void.
But
maybe. And I say that because he's somebody who when he's out there, he might be a bull in a china shop, but he at least is a bull in a china shop and is just giving everything he possibly can. Maybe he needs to work on a few things, but
to a fault.
Yeah.
Well,
maybe
Rome,
sound, but I think
then
that type of mentality, and you can see the fire in him every single time he's out on the pitch.
But then even with that, if you're going to mention Pizzilli, then who could argue that Baldanzi isn't?
He was the other one that I was actually
right. Baldanzi reminds me of a Florenzi back in the day. plays with 100% heart, runs his ass off.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, maybe a couple of mishaps here and there, but majority of his game is pretty good. He shows that youth in him, that drive, that grinta.
Yeah.
That's what us fans, us Romanisti want to see. Circle back to Mancini. He's the type of player, the model player that we all want to see represent this club and wear the jersey. So yeah,
Yeah. No,
that's my take.
I think that's great. And before we go too long, I guess we can wrap it up here. I think a lot of things were said.
Yeah.
Some of them really good, some of them great. So thank you guys for joining
Agreed.
us today. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Ciao.
Ciao,
Ciao,
ciao.
ciao.